It was a Tuesday morning in late October, and I was sitting alone at the corner table of a coffee shop I'd been going to for 30 years. The place hadn't changed much. Same cracked leather on the booth seats, same smell of burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls that nobody ordered anymore. I had a mug in front of me and a photograph face-up on the table, the way I always did when I came here. A habit I couldn't shake even after all this time. The photo was old. The edges had gone soft and the colors had faded to something warmer than they actually were, like memory does to everything eventually. In it, my daughter was 7 years old. She was standing in our backyard in Dayton, Ohio, squinting into the sun, one hand shielding her eyes and the other holding a kite string that disappeared out of the frame. She was laughing at something my wife had said. I couldn't remember what it was anymore. I'd tried to, over the years. It was gone. My daughter's name was Nadia. She disappeared 26 years ago when she was 19 years old. I don't say went missing anymore. I used to say it that way because it felt gentler, like she'd just wandered off somewhere and would eventually wander back. But after 26 years, you stop needing the gentle version. She disappeared. And I never stopped looking. The woman who sat down across from me that morning, I didn't recognize her at first. I thought she'd made a mistake, thought she was looking for someone else, that she'd confused my table for another. She was maybe 45, 46, dark hair pulled back. She wore a grey coat and she had a leather messenger bag over one shoulder. She didn't ask if the seat was taken. She just set the bag down on the bench across from me, sat down and folded her hands on the table. Then she looked at the photograph. She didn't look at me first. She looked at the photograph. "You still carry that with you," she said. It wasn't a question. I looked up. "Excuse me?" "The photo," she said. "Of the girl with the kite." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear exactly. Something older than fear. "I don't know you," I said. She reached into her bag and placed a manila envelope on the table between us. Thick, sealed. She didn't push it toward me. She just set it there. "Everything you've been trying to find out about what happened to your daughter," she said, "is in that envelope." I stared at her. My hands were flat on the table. I didn't touch the envelope. "Who are you?" I said. "And how do you know about my daughter?" She held my eyes for a moment, and then she said something that stopped the air in my lungs. "Because I'm the girl in that photo." My daughter was 19 when she left for her second year at Ohio State. She'd spent the summer at home in Dayton, working at a hardware store and saving money, and I drove her back to Columbus myself on a Sunday in late August. We stopped at a Bob Evans on the way and split a piece of pie. She talked the whole drive about her roommate situation, about a professor she was nervous about a boy in her English class she'd mentioned twice in the same sentence and then pretended she hadn't. When I dropped her off at the dorm, she hugged me longer than usual. I thought it was just because she was glad to be back. I didn't read anything into it. She called that Wednesday, then the following Monday, then she didn't call. After 2 weeks, I phoned her roommate. The roommate said Nadia had left one evening, a Thursday, and hadn't come back. She'd assumed Nadia had gone home for the weekend. She didn't know it had been longer than that. My wife, Lorraine, she's been gone now 8 years. A stroke, right here in Dayton. She was the one who called the Columbus police that first night. I was standing in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, not able to make myself dial, and Lorraine just took it out of my grip and dialed it herself. That was how she was. She acted while I was still standing there trying to figure out what was real. The police came. The investigation started. And then, the way these things go, it slowly went quiet. They found her car in a lot off High Street, locked, nothing unusual inside. Her backpack was in her dorm room. Her wallet was at the dorm, minus $60 in cash. No signs of a struggle anywhere. No witnesses who could place her beyond a convenience store 2 blocks from campus, where she'd bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum at 8:47 p.m. The camera footage showed her walking out, walking north. And then nothing. The FBI came in eventually. A man named Special Agent Rutherford, who had kind eyes and a flat voice, and who called us every month for about 3 years, and then every few months after that, and then after a while barely at all. I don't blame him. I know how many cases cross a desk like his. I know what the statistics say about cases that go cold after the first year. I knew then too, I just couldn't let myself look at those numbers and apply them to my daughter. I hired 2 private investigators over the years. The first one, about 5 years in, took $11,000 from me and produced a report full of dead ends he hadn't bothered to follow. The second one, closer to 15 years in, was more honest. He told me after 6 months that he'd followed every thread he could find, that there was nothing new to pull on, and that he was sorry. He refunded part of what I'd paid him. I respected that. Lorraine and I used to sit at the kitchen table on Sunday evenings and go through it together. Folders, printouts, a corkboard we eventually took down because it was too much to look at every day. We didn't stop believing Nadia was out there. We just stopped being able to hold the weight of it in the same room all the time. You have to put it down sometimes. Just to keep breathing. After Lorraine died, I carried it alone. I kept the photograph with me because it was the one where Nadia looked the happiest. The kite string going up out of frame, her hand shielding her eyes. Whatever my wife said, that made her laugh. Gone now, I'll never get that back. But I have the laugh itself, frozen in that faded rectangle. I carry it like some men carry a Bible. Not because I always know what to do with it, but because it keeps something alive in me that I can't afford to let go dark. The woman across from me at the coffee shop. I looked at her face the way you look at someone when you're trying very hard to see something specific. I'd spent years looking at age progression photos online, the ones the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children updates periodically. I'd looked at so many women who might have been Nadia if you squinted the right way. I'd gotten good at talking myself out of hope. It's a necessary skill when hope has failed you enough times. That's not possible, I said. I know it sounds that way. My daughter has been missing for 26 years. I know, she said. I know exactly how long it's been. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat on the table. If you're who you're saying you are, I said, then tell me something. Tell me something only she would know. She thought for a moment. Not like someone stalling. More like someone choosing carefully. When you drove me back to Columbus that last summer, she said, we stopped at a Bob Evans. You ordered coffee and a piece of cherry pie. You let me eat most of it because I told you I hadn't had pie in 2 months. And you said that was practically a crime. You played a Tom Petty tape the whole drive. Not a CD, a tape, because you said the radio in that truck was unreliable. And when you dropped me off, I told you I'd call you Wednesday. I called Wednesday, and then I didn't call again. I couldn't speak. You always thought I left, she said quietly. I didn't leave, Dad. I was taken. Her name now was Simone. She'd gone by that for over 20 years, and what she told me over the next 2 hours in that coffee shop rearranged everything I thought I understood about what had happened to my daughter. She had been approached that Thursday night by a man she knew. Someone she'd trusted, a graduate student named Aldrich who ran a study group she attended. She'd believed he was taking her somewhere safe. She hadn't understood what was happening until it was too late to stop it. She'd been moved out of Ohio within 48 hours. By the time she understood the full shape of what she'd walked into, she was in another state, under a different name, tied into something she couldn't see the edges of. I'm not going to detail everything she told me, because some of it is still under investigation, and because some of it is hers to keep. What I will say is this: she had been held not by force after the first year, but by something more insidious: debt, fear, dependence, and the slow erosion of a self that had once known another life. The man who took her had connections to a network of people who moved other people around like assets. When she finally understood what she could do, when she finally had enough distance from it, and enough safety, and enough clarity, she started building the file that was now sitting in the envelope between us. Why didn't you contact me sooner? I asked her. She looked at the table. Because I wasn't safe yet, and because I didn't know if you'd believe me, and because... She stopped. She pressed her lips together. Because I was ashamed. I know that doesn't make sense to you. It makes sense, I said. It doesn't change anything, but it makes sense. I need you to know that I thought about you and Mom every single day. I had to look away for a moment. Out the window, at the parking lot, at nothing in particular. When I looked back, I said, Your mother died 8 years ago." She closed her eyes. She didn't make a sound, but her face did something I hadn't seen on an adult in a long time. Something that looked like a child being told the worst thing. "She looked for you until the end," I said. She never stopped. We sat there in the silence of that for a while. The coffee shop kept going around us. A barista called out someone's order. A man in a jacket came in and shook the rain off his umbrella. The ordinary world, doing what it always does, completely indifferent to the fact that my daughter had just walked back into it. Here is where I want to be honest with you about something, because I think you deserve the honest version. And not just the version that makes me look like I handled everything right. When I opened the envelope that night, alone at my kitchen table in the house I'd lived in for 38 years, what was inside was not only documentation of what had happened to my daughter, it was also a request. Folded inside the file, behind the police reports she'd gathered, and the timeline she'd constructed, and the photographs she'd taken of documents she'd managed to get her hands on. Behind all of that was a letter, handwritten, addressed to me. In it, she explained that the man who had taken her, Aldrich, though that wasn't his real name, had recently been arrested on unrelated charges in another state. She explained that a federal investigation was underway and that she had agreed to cooperate as a witness. She explained that cooperating meant giving testimony that would expose not only him but several others, some of whom had resources and connections that frightened her. She explained that she was not asking me to do anything that crossed a line, but she was asking me for help. Specifically, she was asking for money, not an obscene amount, not millions, $80,000, which was what her attorney had told her she would need to sustain herself through an extended legal process, relocate to a secure address, and cover the costs of protection that the federal program wasn't fully covering. She had savings, she said, but not enough. She'd attached an itemized breakdown. She'd attached a letter from her attorney, a real person I could call and verify. I sat at that table until 2 a.m. I want to tell you that my answer was immediate, that I called her first thing in the morning and told her yes, of course, whatever she needed. I want to tell you the math was simple because she was my daughter. But I'm 67 years old and I've been wrong before, and I've paid for it. And the part of me that had been burned by 2 private investigators and 26 years of false leads and phone calls that never led anywhere, that part of me sat at that kitchen table at 1 a.m. and said, what if this isn't real? What if she was exactly who she said she was? My daughter, my Nadia, but someone had gotten to her, convinced her to run this play on me, used her grief and my grief as a mechanism to extract money from an old man who'd spent decades looking for someone to believe. Or worse, what if she wasn't Nadia at all? I called my son the next morning. My son is 53, lives in Indianapolis, works in logistics, and has the kind of clear head I've never quite had. He's the one who tells me when I'm being irrational, and the one who sat with his mother in her last weeks when I couldn't hold myself together. I trust him more than I trust most people on earth. I told him everything. There was a long silence on his end. You need a DNA test before you give her a single dollar, he said. I know, I said. Dad, I mean it. Whatever she told you, whatever she knew, it's not enough. You need the test. I know, I said again. She agreed without hesitation when I asked. That was the thing that cut through my doubt more than anything else. She didn't balk. She didn't argue. She said, of course. Whatever you need. She came with me to a testing center in Columbus. Neutral, ground neither of our cities, and we submitted samples and sat in the waiting room together without talking much, and she bought us both bad coffee from the machine by the door and handed me mine and said, you look like you haven't slept. I haven't, I said. Me either, she said, but not for the same reason, probably. I looked at her. In the fluorescent light of that waiting room, I could see things I'd been too overwhelmed to see in the coffee shop. The shape of her nose, the way she held her jaw when she was keeping something back. My wife had held her jaw the exact same way. I just need to know for certain, I said. I know, Dad, she said. I'd need it too. The results came back 11 days later. I was standing in my kitchen when I opened the email, and I had to read it twice, and then I sat down in a chair and I didn't get up for a very long time. She was my daughter. The probability was 99.97%. My daughter was alive. My daughter had been alive this whole time, and she had come back to me in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning in October with a photo and a manila envelope and 26 years of a life I hadn't been able to see. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "I know," she said before I could speak. "I just got it too." I could hear her crying on the other end. Not loud. Quiet, like she was trying to hold it back and couldn't quite. "Nadia," I said. I hadn't said her name to a living person who could hear me in 26 years. She made a sound I can't describe, something between a breath and a word. "Hi, Dad," she said. I gave her the $80,000. I want to be clear about that, because I've had people in my life, including my son, initially, who thought I was making a mistake, that I was being led by emotion rather than sense, that I should have waited, that I should have made her wait longer, prove more, earn it somehow. I'm 67 years old, and my wife is gone, and I spent 26 years eating cherry pie alone at a Bob Evans on the anniversary of the last day I saw my daughter, and if there is a single decision in my life I am at peace with, it is writing that check. But I am not naive, and I want you to understand that it was not blind. I spoke to her attorney myself, a woman named Whitfield, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste words. I verified the federal case was real. I confirmed the timeline. I asked questions that a grieving father, who was also a retired insurance adjuster with 30 years of experience reading people and documents, should ask, and every answer I got held up. The federal investigation is ongoing. I can't speak to what Nadia's testimony will produce, or when, or whether the right people will be held fully accountable. What I know is that she is cooperating, that the man who took her is in custody, and that the others who were part of what happened to her are, for the first time in a long time, afraid of something other than her silence. There were consequences I didn't anticipate. My son and I had some hard conversations. He came around eventually, came to Dayton in December, and met his sister for the first time in over 2 decades, and I watched them sit at my kitchen table together, and I thought about Lorraine, about how she would have been at that table, about how she spent so many years looking for something that came back anyway, just 8 years too late for her to see it. I keep the photograph on the mantel now instead of in my pocket. She's still there, 7 years old, squinting into the sun, hand on the kite string, laughing at something her mother said, but it feels different. It's not a wound anymore. It's just a photograph. A good one. What I want to say, and I've thought about how to say this, because I know some of you listening to me right now are in the middle of something like this, or you've come out the other side of something like this, or you've lost someone, and you're still in that long grey stretch of not knowing, is that I can't tell you your story ends the way mine did. I know that's true. I know for every father sitting in a coffee shop who gets the person across the table saying, "I'm the kid in that photo," there are 100 fathers who never get that morning. But I also want to say this. I almost talked myself out of it. Twice. I almost let the reasonable, self-protective part of me override the part that had kept that photograph in my pocket for 26 years. And if I'd been so guarded, so reasonable, so afraid of being wrong, that I couldn't move toward what was right in front of me, I would have lost her a second time. Not to circumstance, to my own fear. There's a difference between caution and armor. Caution asks questions and then listens to the answers. Armor just stays closed. I asked my questions. I got my answers. She came home for Christmas. We had pie, cherry, from a place in Dayton that's been here almost as long as I have. She ate most of it. I let her. Some things, it turns out, are exactly the same as you remember them.